I lost everything in a fire. Then a child gave me hope. People always say you can lose everything in an instant. You hear it, but you don't really believe it. It sounds like a line from a movie, a story that happens to someone else. It's not supposed to be your life, until it is. Until you're the one standing across the street, watching flames chew through the roof you called home just hours ago. You're just standing there, shivering in the cold, while the sirens and shouting all fade into a dull roar. The only thing you can really hear is the crackle and collapse of your own life turning to ash. You feel nothing and everything all at once, and that's when you get it. That's when you realize everything isn't just a word anymore. It's the gaping hole where your life used to be. Section 1, The Loss. I remember standing in my kitchen, sniffing the milk carton to see if it was good for one last coffee. The sun was hitting that perfect spot on the floor, the one that always made me feel like the day had promise. I remember the little things, the familiar weight of my favorite mug, my dog's tail thumping a happy rhythm against the table leg, the stack of mail I kept promising myself I'd sort through. My life wasn't built on big, grand moments. It was built from a million tiny, forgettable details that all wove together to make my world. I'd only gone out to run a few errands, a quick trip to the grocery store, a stop at the post office. I couldn't have been gone more than 2 hours. The first clue that something was wrong was the smell. A thick, bitter smell that hung in the air for blocks. Then I saw the smoke, a black column staining a perfect blue sky. A cold, sharp dread stabbed me. "Please, not my street," I whispered, a pointless little prayer. As I turned the final corner, the car slowed to a crawl. Fire trucks were everywhere. Their lights flashed in an eerie silence. Their work was already done, and there it was, or where it was supposed to be, my home. Just a skeletal frame, blackened and gaping, still breathing smoke from its wounds. The next few hours are a total blur of noise and numbness. Neighbors I barely knew wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, their eyes filled with pity. A firefighter with a soot-stained face asked me questions I couldn't process. Did I have a place to go? Was anyone else inside? No, it was just me and the dog, and my dog was in the car with me. A single sharp spike of relief in an absolute ocean of loss. I stood there for what felt like forever, just watching the last of the steam rise into the night sky. Losing a home isn't about the wood and the drywall. It's losing your safe space, your comfort, your security. Every object inside wasn't just a thing. It was the worn-out armchair that was molded perfectly to my body. The mismatched coffee mugs, each one a memory of a different person or a different time. The photos on the wall, their smiling faces now just a memory of a memory. The fire didn't just take my stuff, it torched my history. It took the physical proof that my life had happened. At first, your mind kind of protects you. It wraps you in shock, a daze where you can't possibly grasp how huge the disaster is. I felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's tragedy. But as the adrenaline wore off, that shock started to crack, and what was underneath was just an abyss. An abyss. Section 2, The Despair and the Turning Point. The days that followed were a chaotic mess of logistics and soul-crushing despair. I was on the phone with insurance companies where I was just a policy number. I took hollow trips to sterile department stores to buy a toothbrush and socks, things I'd never had to think about buying before. My friends and family were amazing, offering their couches and cooking me meals. But even when I was in a room full of people, I felt completely alone. They could give me a roof over my head, but they couldn't give me back my sense of self, which was all tied up in the home I'd made. Grief is a strange, full-body experience. It wasn't just being sad. It was a deep, profound exhaustion that settled into my bones. There was this constant, humming anxiety, a feeling of being totally untethered and exposed. Simple choices, like what to have for breakfast, felt impossibly hard. I'd just drift through the days in a fog, replaying the fire, getting lost in the what-ifs. Sometimes anger would just flare up out of nowhere, hot and pointless, aimed at everything and nothing, at the world for being so unfair, at myself for leaving the house that day. Weeks bled into a month, and the numbness finally gave way to a heavy, suffocating hopelessness. I was in a small, temporary apartment. It was clean, it was safe, but it felt like a waiting room, not a home. The four walls just seemed to press in on me, making the emptiness feel even bigger. I had hit rock bottom. The initial wave of support had naturally faded as people got back to their own lives, and the long, lonely reality of starting from zero set in. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I'd lost my past, and I couldn't even begin to imagine a future. What was the point of rebuilding when I felt so completely hollowed out? and that's when the turning point came. Right there, at my absolute lowest. It wasn't some big dramatic movie moment. It was small, quiet, and totally unexpected. I was sitting on a bench in a local park, just trying to breathe air that didn't feel recycled. I was watching families play and dogs chase balls, watching life just move on for everyone else. I felt completely invisible inside my grief. Then, this little girl, no older than 5 or 6, broke away from her mom and marched right up to me. She had on these bright pink boots and a very serious look on her face. She just stood there for a second, staring at me. I tried to smile, but my face felt like it was made of stone. I figured her mom would call her back any second. Instead, the little girl held out her hand. In her palm was a small, smooth gray stone, an ordinary little rock you'd find anywhere, but she held it out to me like it was the most precious thing in the world. "This is a wishing stone," she said, her voice so clear and certain. "You hold it really tight and think of something happy, then it keeps the sadness away." She didn't wait for me to answer. She just placed the stone in my limp hand. Her tiny fingers were so warm against my cold skin, and then she skipped back to her mom, who gave me this soft, knowing smile. I just stared at the stone in my palm. It was just a rock, a simple gray rock. But in that moment, it felt like an anchor. It was something real and solid in a world that had gone completely sideways. It was an act of pure, uncomplicated kindness from a kid who knew nothing about my loss, my insurance claims, or my grief. She just saw someone who looked sad, and her first instinct was to help. Tears started to well up in my eyes. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something else, a tiny crack of light in the darkness. That little girl, with her pink boots and her wishing stone, didn't solve any of my problems. My house was still gone. My things were still ashes. But she reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that there was still good in the world, that a connection, no matter how small, was still possible. She gave me a piece of hope, as small and as solid as that stone in my hand. Section 3. The glimmer of hope and the path forward. I held onto that stone the entire walk back to the apartment. I rolled it between my fingers, feeling its smooth, cool surface. Nothing had actually changed, but at the same time everything had. The crushing hopelessness that had been shadowing me for weeks had loosened its grip, just a tiny bit. For the first time, I felt like I could take a full, deep breath. That small act of kindness was like a pebble dropped into the still, dark pond of my grief, and the ripples started spreading out. It wasn't a magic fix. The road ahead was still incredibly hard. Rebuilding a life from absolutely nothing is a slow, frustrating process. There were still days filled with overwhelming sadness, moments where the sheer size of what I had to do felt paralyzing, but the why felt different. Before the girl with the stone, I was just going through the motions to survive. Now I had a reason to actually try. I wasn't just rebuilding to get back what I lost. I was building toward the kind of goodness that she represented. I started small, making one little decision at a time to get some control back. I bought a new coffee mug, a bright, cheerful one with no memories attached. It was a promise of new memories to come. I started taking walks in that same park, not to sit in my sadness, but to actually watch the world and feel like a part of it again. I started really talking to my friends and family again, not just about what I'd lost, but about what could be next. I learned that sharing the story was part of the healing. That kid's simple gesture completely shifted my perspective. I had been so consumed by losing things, by a history I could hold. She reminded me that the most valuable things aren't things at all. They're connections, empathy, the quiet, unprompted kindness of a stranger. I started to see that while the fire took my house, it couldn't take my ability to connect with people, to feel gratitude, or to find meaning. In a weird way, by stripping everything away, the fire forced me to figure out what was actually essential. My life is very different today. I have a new home filled with new things. I was able to save some of the old photos, salvaged digitally from friends' phones and cloud backups, and they hang on my new walls. It's a life that's still under construction, piece by piece, but it's built on a new foundation now, one that values people way more than possessions and gratitude over grievances. I've even started volunteering at a local community center. Helping others has become a powerful part of my own healing, and I hope I can be a source of support for people going through their own dark times. Losing everything I owned was the most devastating thing that has ever happened to me. It hollowed me out and pushed me right to the edge of despair, but in the ashes of all that loss, a child's simple gift taught me that you can't ever truly lose everything. You can't lose the human capacity for kindness. You can't lose hope, not really. Sometimes it just gets buried, waiting for a small, gentle hand to uncover it again. I still have that gray stone. It sits on my new windowsill, right where it can catch the morning sun. It's not a magic wishing stone, but it's a constant reminder, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a single glimmer of light is enough to show you the way forward. And it's a reminder that you are so much more resilient than you could ever imagine. Thank you for letting me share my story. We all have moments that change us. I'd love to read about yours. In the comments below, feel free to share a story about an unexpected act of kindness that gave you hope when you needed it most. Your story might just be the wishing stone someone else needs to find today. And if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in hard times, please think about subscribing. Thanks for listening.